The spring transfer portal window opens in less than a week. We'll tell you what the Tigers might be hunting. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you so much for that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Spring portal window is less than a week away. On Wednesday, the 10-day portal window will open. And there's a big question around Baton Rouge as to whether or not LSU is going to be a buyer in this spring portal window the way they were, or the way they tried to be a year ago. We're delving into that today. And Nick Saban joins the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. You know, I got some thoughts on that. We'll get to it here in just a quick second. So this popped on my radar because Max Olson over at ESPN did a piece where he looked at all of the contenders, the college football playoff contenders for 2025, and their biggest portal needs. And when he looked at LSU, yes, considering LSU a contender, he mentioned defensive tackle and notes that they brought in Sadir Mitchell from Texas in December, but the fact that he only played 49 career snaps, and the fact that LSU, while they have numbers, maybe doesn't have a playmaker. He notes, quote, if a proven performer and a clear upgrade hits the market in April, expect LSU to be a contender. And I'll tell you that from the information I've been able to gather, Max Olson is absolutely correct. That is the one spot where if LSU can find a player in the portal that's an impact player, they would be looking to bring him in. So a couple things here. Remember, first and foremost, this isn't a month-long transfer portal window. It is a 10-day portal window. So guys aren't going to have a lot of time to make the decision if they want to jump in the portal. Now we know tampering happens, and it's what it is. It's just the day and age of college football. But what's maybe most important about this is that we're not just talking about adding a defensive tackle to add a body. We're talking about potentially adding someone who would have to be special, like a really special type defensive tackle. I mean, keep in mind, your numbers at defensive tackle right now are really good. We talked in a previous episode about Jacoby and Guillory returning to practice, which is awesome news. Guillory's coming back for a 6th season, and there's reason to be really excited about that. But keep in mind, Jacoby and Guillory, during his 5 years in Baton Rouge, has played in 41 games, but he started just 5 times. So while he is a veteran player who's been around a long time, and is probably your best defensive tackle returning, just like he was a season ago, he's only started 5 games and is in his 5 years. So yes, veteran player, not a ton of experience, though. Sean Washington returns. I remember started his career at Georgia, went JUCO. Last year at LSU, Washington played in all 12 games with no starts and was really a seldom used rotational guy. I mentioned Sadir Mitchell, who you brought in from Texas. Now, Bo Davis thought enough of him to recruit him to Texas and then sign him in the portal at LSU. Now, Bo Davis, of course, with the New Orleans Saints. But Sadir Mitchell, in 2 seasons at Texas, played in 49 snaps. Not 49 games, didn't make 49 tackles. In 2 seasons, he played in 49 snaps, period. So that's a guy who really struggled to get on the field in his 2 years at Texas. But that's 3 big, physically big and veteran defensive linemen. And then you add Ahmad Bro and Dom McKinley, 2 guys who played a lot as freshmen a year ago with very high ceilings. Bro moved inside from end to tackle and played very well. McKinley, the 5-star, missed the first month of the season with an injury with turf toe. And then when it came on late, it was really impressive. I mean, he had a 2-sack game in the process, and he's a guy that I think can be a star. But again, guys that are rising sophomores. And then you're bringing in 4 true freshmen. Now, a guy like, guys like Dylan Battle, who's there right now. I mean, you're talking about some dudes that are really big, like physically big players that LSU has added here on the defensive line. So you got 9. You got 9 defensive tackles. But again, Guillory is your most experienced veteran, and he started just 5 games in 5 years. So all that to say, if there's a player that jumps in the portal that's started 25 college games and he goes into the portal and he's an immediate upgrade, then absolutely you're going to look at that. Now, remember, this is the thing that kind of happened a year ago, but it sort of illustrates a contrast in where you were. Last year, after the spring game, when the spring portal window was going to open, Brian Kelly was very adamant that they had a need at defensive tackle. It wasn't we'd like to add somebody. No, they had to go add bodies at defensive tackle. They didn't have to be picky, but they needed bodies at defensive tackle. And remember, they had Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow lined up. Williams coming from TCU, Barrow coming from Michigan State. Bo Davis had those guys lined up. Coach Pete Jenkins confirmed that to us. And ultimately, LSU wasn't willing to spend what they needed to spend. Remember, Dominic Williams wanted $1.2 million, and LSU said, absolutely not. And whether they were right or wrong to do that is up to anyone else to decide. But remember, it was that moment that spawned this comment from Brian Kelly.
It hasn't fared very well, quite frankly, because, we're selling something a little bit differently. And that is, we want to recruit, we want to engage, build relationships, we want to develop, retain, and have success. We're not in the market of buying players.
Okay.
And unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought.
A year ago, LSU wasn't in the market of buying players. My, how times have changed, because LSU just went and bought the best transfer portal class in the country in December. And if there is a starting caliber defensive tackle like Dominic Williams or Simeon Barrow that hits the market in this portal window, they are going to be buyers. I'll remind you why they had so much urgency a year ago. Remember, last year, you saw so much of your depth hit the transfer portal. Ends like Quincy Wiggins and Jackson Howard, tackles like Tyge Hill, Fitzgerald West, Bryce Langston. Your numbers were completely depleted at defensive tackle at this point a year ago. So they had to go get somebody. Remember, they tried to get CJ West from Kent State. He picked Indiana. They tried to get Dominic Williams. He picked Oklahoma. They tried to get Simeon Barrow. He picked Miami. They kept getting outbid on these guys. And ultimately what they landed was JVR Suggs from Grand Valley State, who became a nice interior pass rusher, but wasn't exactly what you were looking for. And then your defensive line issue became exacerbated when Jacobian Guillory got injured. And then we saw the domino effect where Gio Paez had to kick inside, where Paris Shand went from end to tackle at 272 pounds, where Ahmad Bro, as a freshman making the transition from end to tackle, had to become a real key contributor for you. Well, it's a dramatically different year this year because you're not desperate for bodies. You are willing to entertain a really key impact guy. So that's what we're keeping an eye on when that portal window opens on Wednesday. Do we see someone who has been a key starter at defensive tackle somewhere in the country, preferably in the Power 5, jump into the portal? The same way that I just mentioned about Williams or Barrow, or 2 years ago when it was Braden Fisk at Western Michigan that LSU and everybody wanted. He landed at Florida State and became an All-American in his 1 year in Tallahassee. If that guy goes in the portal, the equivalent of that guy goes in the portal, LSU is going to be a buyer. Other than that, they're probably content just to sit on the sideline and watch. Now, there's one other position that I think is a wild card that LSU could be looking at in this portal cycle. I'll tell you what that is next. Locked in LSU, your team every day. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals and assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets into same-game parlays for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. So remember we mentioned that Brian Kelly a year ago at this time was pretty adamant. They absolutely had to go into the transfer portal to get defensive tackle help. Now remember also after the spring game, he very openly said that he had kind of wished that Peyton Todd had won the punting job and they might be looking for reinforcements there. Ultimately, they signed Blake Oxendorf from Louisiana Tech at punter in the spring portal cycle. So the Tigers were buyers in the spring cycle a year ago. It'll be really interesting to see if they're buyers in this cycle, especially when Brian Kelly here during spring practice at one of the media availabilities that he had said in no uncertain terms that they don't have to go get anybody.
I think we go into this next portal window with no expectations of we need to get somebody out of the spring portal. It would have to be something that just was a right fit for us. So we don't go into the second portal with any expectations like we had going into the December portal.
So they had expectations a year ago. They had expectations in December. And those expectations were go build a championship contender. Everyone was ticked off about the Bryce Underwood thing, Jakeem Stewart, Cade Phillips flipping. Everyone was ticked. Money came pouring into the collective. You wanted to build a contender. You went and spent, and it worked. Now you got to win. But you're in a dramatically different situation right now because you don't have any very glaring needs. But I will tell you one more position. One more. Where if the right guy is there, you take a look. Now, and that's, I won't bury the lead here. It's offensive tackle. And it's such a different reality today in the portal world because the transfer portal allows you to go get what amounts to free agents, veteran players who can immediately fill positions of need. Whereas in the not too distant past, we would have been so excited about the highly regarded high school signees finally getting their chance to play. And that's what LSU is looking at right now at offensive tackle. With Will Campbell and Emory Jones both leaving for the NFL, this is the opportunity for Tyree Adams and Weston Davis. Remember, Tyree Adams was a top 100 overall prospect when he signed with LSU. You know, Adams was a really highly regarded player coming out of the New Orleans area. You know, depending on what scouting service you were looking at, that's a guy who was a highly regarded, a high four-star offensive tackle. Well, he's bided his time. He's waited his turn, and now this is his chance to start. He started the bowl game at left tackle in place of Will Campbell, and this is a guy that a lot of people I think are really high on. At right tackle, you know, Weston Davis. Weston Davis was a legitimate five-star who LSU flipped from Texas A&M. So this was a guy that was another top 100 overall prospect in the country. And these are the types of dudes you'd be so fired up to finally get a chance to see him play. But it comes with a little anxiety because you're replacing Will Campbell, Emory Jones, and also on the interior with Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier. Those dudes combined for 170 games played together in college. I mean, the last 3 years, they all played in their same spots for 3 straight seasons. Well, you have recruited really well, and you've gone in the portal and you addressed center and guard. Braylon Moore at Virginia Tech, who can be your plug-and-play starter at center, and you brought Josh Thompson in, who they would love to see settle in at guard. Well, a huge part of Josh Thompson settling in at guard is required that Adams and Davis win the starting tackle jobs. Because if they don't, then that means you probably got to take Josh Thompson and kick him out and play tackle, unless you're able to go find somebody in the transfer portal who is a proven starter at offensive tackle. Now, we've already seen one name of a starter at offensive tackle jump into the portal. Appalachian State offensive tackle Markel Samuel has announced his plans to enter the transfer portal. He was all Sun Belt honorable mention. He's played in 29 games. He started 18 of them at left tackle. So you're talking about Markel Samuel as a guy who might very well be someone who fits that mold, who's a proven starter at left tackle. Now, I don't know necessarily that that's someone LSU is going to be interested in. He's 6'4". His recruiting profile was 6'4", 265, so smallish. Now, that he's in the class of 2019, so he's been around college football for a long time. And this is going to be his last opportunity as a super senior to play up a year of major college athletics, see if he can cash in, and then try his hand before the NFL. Now, he may be looking at a spot that's more plug and play, but that's kind of the type of guy we're talking about that could be of interest. And I'll remind you that LSU in the December portal window was kicking the tires on offensive tackles. And my information that I got was that LSU had been talking with someone who was part of a college football playoff team, and they felt like they were going to get that player had he entered the portal. Well, that player ultimately decided not to enter the portal, and LSU was content with signing Josh Thompson only on the offensive line. So if there's one other spot to look at outside of defensive tackle, which that's not just my guess, that's information that I have, that if there is a spot that LSU would be looking, it's defensive tackle for an impact guy. Again, not a body, someone who is a proven impact guy who they think can come in and have an All-America or certainly All-SEC caliber season. The other to keep an eye on that they didn't address in the December portal window would be offensive tackle. But is it fair to say that with the guys you got, you feel pretty good? So you're making your way through spring. They've had a really good look at these guys at tackle, and as much as they've rotated, maybe Brian Kelly, maybe Brad Davis, maybe they feel better today about the guys they have than they did when it was still a question back in December, now that you've gone through this spring practice. So just something else to keep an eye on as the spring portal window opens coming up on Wednesday. Okay, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. We'll wrap up with a little talk about, well, one of everybody's favorite topics, Nick Saban. Nick Saban is a lightning rod, and there's no denying that. We all know the history there. He is the greatest coach in the history of college football. Not only did he win 7 national championships, he did it at 2 different schools, and he did it in the most competitive era in the history of this sport, where not only did you have scholarship limits, but you also ended up having transfer portal, NIL, the college football playoff, which meant you had to win a 4-team and then ultimately now a 16-team or a 12-team playoff, which I think will grow again. But anyway, the point being, it's never been harder to win than it is now. And Nick Saban, every time college football evolved, he evolved with it and did it better than anybody else, which is why he's the greatest coach of all time. And from an LSU fan's perspective, it sucks because you had a front row seat for his dominance. And it's salt in the wound, the fact that he was once your coach. And how could you not longingly think, what if he had never left here? So I understand all of the emotions that go along with that. Amid your greatest run ever in your program's history, you had to watch your former coach outdo you time and time again, building the greatest dynasty the sport's ever seen at a rival in your own division. I'm not blind to any of that. I get it. But 2 things can be true at the same time. You can hate watching Nick Saban win all the championships he did at Alabama and beating LSU and preventing LSU's further success. I mean, LSU would have won a championship in 2011, but for Nick Saban at Alabama. 2012 in the Yeldon play. People forget that. If LSU tackles TJ Yeldon in 2012, then LSU goes to the SEC championship game to take on Georgia. And if LSU wins, they get the right to beat the hell out of Notre Dame in the national championship game that year. And all the sins of 2011 are wiped away. But this is just you don't need the historical preface here. It's all to say I understand why a lot of LSU fans have angst and quite honestly just not great things to say about Nick Saban. That's true. Also true is everything you are as a program, you are because of Nick Saban. He came in at a time when nobody believed an SEC championship, let alone a national championship, was possible. I mean, Jerry DiNardo won the West a couple times, but kept losing the tiebreakers to Alabama and Auburn, never got to Atlanta. Atlanta felt like forbidden fruit. Now it almost feels like a birthright. Like you're not excited when LSU has to go play in the SEC championship game. My God, in 2001, that was euphoria when LSU went to Atlanta for the first time and beat number 2 Tennessee, cost them a shot at a national championship. That's all Nick. What you are today is because Nick lit the fuse, showed you what you can be. You might be wondering, why am I talking about Nick Saban? Well, on Wednesday, we learned that Nick Saban is going to be inducted this summer into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. Now, the caveat here is he was actually elected back in 2020. And in 2020, it was a little bit more controversial because Nick was still coaching at the time. And so the thought is, why are you inducting the current Alabama coach into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame? Well, Nick was elected in 2020, and because of the global pandemic, that year's ceremony was canceled, and there were changes to the recruiting calendar. And so Nick has not yet been able to attend the ceremony for induction. So while he has been elected, he has not yet been inducted. That will change this summer. Nick, of course, is now retired. And Ronnie Rance, the president of the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, confirmed on Wednesday that Nick Saban has been added to the 2025 class and will be inducted this June in Natchitoches in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. And while I know there's a lot of LSU fans who would love to jeer, I submit we all stand up and cheer Nick Saban, because while you can hate what he did at Alabama and the misery he put you through for so many years, the reason you've seen LSU win 3 national titles and play for a 4th since the year 2003 is because of Nick Saban. It's because he awakened the sleeping giant. Nick Saban's the one that showed you put a fence around this state and believe you can, and you can actually win championships at LSU, and that's changed the expectation around here. So I want all of the accolades for Nick associated with LSU. I want him to be in the LSU Hall of Fame. I want him to have a statue outside of Tiger Stadium. I want him in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and every other Hall of Fame that is worthy. So I congratulate Nick Saban. I'm excited to be there this June to watch that ceremony up in Natchitoches for the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and see Nick Saban very rightly inducted into our state's Sports Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Nick Saban, and we'll look forward to the induction coming up this June in Natchitoches. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Hey, thanks for making us your first listen. How about for your second listen, you check out Locked On NFL Draft. As your favorite college players get ready for the next level, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hey, if you are on podcasts, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.